growth process where you can grab data on merchants. It's something that that they do at Gorgeous that I was really impressed with. And then I discovered Tyler's tool that he built from the ground up himself. And I said, oh my God, this is exactly what, Shopify app partners are looking for. It's solving our problem even deeper than a tool like Built With. And he's going to show you why and how to use it. And yes, you could use a tool like Built With instead of his tool. But once you see the difference, you're going to go, oh my God, I need to start this whole process in my company right now. And it's something that I do personally. We track about 900,000 merchants on a daily basis, I want to say. And we use HubSpot as our CRM to understand kind of movements in their market. And with that said, let me bring Tyler in here. Also, he's coming off of a pretty bad injury, so I hope he's feeling all right. Tyler, how you doing? You feeling okay? Yeah, you're on mute right now.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Actually, the ankle is all right. The worst part is my 1-year-old who's teething, who kept me up all night last night. But
I see. So the pain didn't keep you up. It's
I had an extra coffee and everything's good.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, with all that said, I will let you take it away and introduce a little bit more of Storeleads and the tool and the data process and all the cool things that we can do to sell into merchants.
Sounds good. Now I will share my desktop and hopefully you can still see me when I'm doing this. I hope so. All right. So today I'll show you how to use data for merchant acquisition. And for the most part, I'll focus on the first step of acquisition known as prospecting. And I'll show you how to use Storeleads to do it. Storeleads, as Derek mentioned, is a tool that I built to catalog, understand, and discover e-commerce merchants. And later, when I'm done, Derek will show you how he integrates Storeleads with other tools, covering the end-to-end process from prospecting to outreach. But first, a little bit of background on how Storeleads came to be. I'm a developer, and in early 2018, I released a Shopify app called Merchant Mail. It's a lightweight customer support app that integrates Shopify and Gmail. Now, the app got some initial traction through the Shopify App Store, but I wanted to accelerate its growth. So I started with paid advertising. And I should mention that I started with advertising simply because I'm a one-person shop. I needed something scalable. I didn't have the time for other forms of outreach like phone calls, which can be more time-consuming, but often more effective. But the same approaches that I described today work equally well for other forms of outreach. For Merchant Mail, my ideal customer profile is a Shopify merchant using Gmail or G Suite. And I started with simple keyword advertising, but the ROI was terrible. I realized then that I needed more data to improve my ad targeting. So I did the exact opposite of what you should do. Instead of going out and spending a few $100s to buy the data, which is cheap in the grand scheme of things, I spent a few months on a project to collect information on Shopify merchants. Now, the economics of this decision were completely upside down, but it seemed like a fun project and I just couldn't help myself. I was able to put together a list of Shopify merchants using Gmail and G Suite, and using this list, the ROI on my ad spend improved 3x simply through better targeting. But I realized that my ad targeting could be even better, and I started focusing on merchants that were more likely to pay for my app. I filtered out the smallest merchants. These were merchants that had just launched and merchants that weren't paying for many other apps. And it turns out, in my case, I also needed to filter out the largest merchants since they were more likely to be using a more sophisticated support tool like Gorgeous. Now, with these changes, ROI improvement was now 6x, and I was just scratching the surface. There were several other improvements that I could have made, like targeting by country and language, but the initial results were enough to convince me that I should focus on this tool full time. So I polished it for external use and released it to the public as Storeleads at the end of 2018. And since then, a few hundred paying customers have used Storeleads for prospecting. The vast majority of them fall into one of two groups: technology vendors and marketing agencies. These are fairly diverse groups, but they share a similar need, which is finding relevant merchants. So how do you find relevant merchants? Well, it turns out that you need data. You need data to filter out the merchants that aren't interesting so that you can focus on merchants that match your ideal customer profile. You need data to improve the efficiency of your marketing and sales efforts. In short, data helps grow your business. Now, every business has a slightly different ideal customer profile. My customers have come to me with just about every request imaginable, to the point that Storeleads now collects about 35 different attributes for each store and provides around 65 filtering options. That means that no matter what your needs are, there's a good chance that Storeleads can help you find relevant merchants. Now, I'll walk you through some common scenarios that my customers have used to identify new leads. If you don't have a prospecting strategy yet, these are great starting points. The three approaches for prospecting that I see over and over again are finding high value merchants, finding high growth merchants, and finding merchants based on technology usage. For finding high value merchants, this generally means larger merchants who can be identified in a few different ways: by their employee count, by estimated revenue, by the number of followers they have on social media, by the pricing plan they use on e-commerce platforms. Those are the main ways, but there are a few more. For finding high growth merchants, this means identifying prospects based on their growth rate. For instance, the growth rate of their social media followers. This can help you find the diamonds in the rough. These are the merchants that are trending and growing quickly. They might not be the biggest merchants today, but they might be at the top of the charts in a year or two. And finally, finding merchants based on technology usage. This approach is useful if you have specific competitors or partner technologies that you want to target. Now let's do a quick tour of Storeleads and then use it with these three prospecting approaches. So over here, you can find Storeleads at storeleads.app. And once the homepage loads, you can click on the Access Now button. If you don't already have an account, you can create one for free by signing in with Google or Facebook. After logging in, you'll see, well, you might see a welcome tour, but once you get through the welcome tour, you'll see a list of e-commerce stores here on the right. These stores are ordered by rank with the most popular stores at the top. On the left, over here, we have search filters that you can click on to narrow the list. For instance, we can click on Platform Shopify and Status Active to see a list of active Shopify stores. There's a lot of them, slightly more than 1.2 million. Now, there are a lot of other filtering options, but I'll talk about them more a little bit later. At any point, you can click the Export button in the top right corner, and you'll get a downloaded CSV file that includes all the stores that match your current search. Even if there are a few million stores matching your search, you can click Export, and you'll get a really big CSV file. What are you going to find in that file? Well, pretty much everything I'll show you next. There's about 30 attributes for each stores. Exporting is one of the primary ways to get data out of Storeleads. But if you want to, you can also use our API to pull data or use one of our pre-built integrations that I'll cover later. I should mention that exporting is a paid feature, so you won't be able to do it on the free plan, but you can download a sample to see what it looks like. Now, closing this up, on the right, we have a list of stores matching the current search filters. And you can customize the list of columns that are shown by clicking on this gear icon down in the bottom right. You can see there are a lot of options, and this lets you tailor the UI to meet your needs. If you're interested in seeing Instagram followers for each of the stores without clicking through to see the details, you can do that. You just customize your columns and then drag and drop the headers to customize it exactly how you want. Now let's click on a store to see some details. Let's click on the top one, Fashion Nova. What do we see? Well, a whole bunch of attributes for the stores. We see the merchant name, the e-commerce platform that they're using, the country of operation, the company location, if known, in this case, Los Angeles, estimated sales, employees, category, which it's industry vertical, but I call it category, the number of products sold, the average product price. If at any point in time you want to get a better understanding of what each of these fields mean, just hover over the field name and you'll get a description. Scrolling down a little bit to the bottom, we have a series of tabs here that reveal more information. The default tab is social contact, and that shows you information about the store's social media presence. In the case of Fashion Nova, they have accounts on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and YouTube. We also see TikTok, Snapchat, LinkedIn, and if the store provides email addresses and phone numbers, you'll get that information here. Now, I'm also displaying not only the number of followers, but a summary of the recent follower changes. In the last 30 days, Fashion Nova has accumulated over 124,000 additional followers. And that's a growth rate of 0.7% because they already have a lot of followers, well over 18 million. But just by looking at these graphs, you can get a really great understanding of the growth rate of the social media presence on all these different networks. You can click through on the account name to go directly to the social network site and get a look at their posts. In the future, I'm actually hoping to pull these posts directly into Storeleads so you can understand how these merchants are positioning themselves, how they're advertising, how they're promoting sales and whatnot. Okay, so let's look at another tab, Apps and Tech. And this gives you an understanding of what technologies and applications are running on the store. Apps and Tech are similar, there's just one slight difference. They both provide extra functionality that isn't normally provided in the base e-commerce platform. The difference, however, is that apps are installed through the e-commerce platform's App Store. And this lets me pull in and show a little bit more information, like the number of reviews for the app and the average rating. You don't see it here on this page, but if you were to click through on these apps, which we'll do a little bit later, you'll get that information. So we get the app description as well as the name, and we get information about the date that the app was installed. Technologies are different from apps. They're very similar in the sense that they provide extended functionality for a store, but they're not installed through an app store. So as a result, I just have a little bit less information than I can provide. I can't provide average rating and number of reviews. So just a little bit below our app list, we can actually click on an app change log to see the full list of app changes over time. And this lets you see apps that the store has tried in the past and ultimately rejected. Below that, we have the technology list. Looks a lot like apps, which technologies are running, a brief description. You can click on it to get more details, as well as the date that the technology was installed, followed by the full technology changelog at the bottom. All right, scrolling back up to the top, there's a few other tabs, but in the interest of time, I won't get into them now. Scrolling back up to the top, we see icons for integrations. Now, I have out-of-the-box integrations with HubSpot and Outreach. And I'm hoping to add another integration with more CRMs by the end of this year. At the very least, I'll do Salesforce by the end of the year. Now, when you enable an integration, that enables functionality for exporting data directly into that CRM. And it also keeps the data in sync on a weekly basis. I update data on my website every single week. And when you have an integration enabled and you've imported data through it, then I'll automatically keep it up to sync as soon as I publish the data. Another integration that's coming by the end of the year is LinkedIn Sales Navigator widgets. Now, these will show employees at the store directly within Storeleads UI. And this is a great way to find decision makers at each store. Now, let's close down the domain details. That's just a quick overview. And we'll click on the hamburger icon over here to expose the menu. There's a lot of other areas of functionality that you can access, but let's click on apps. And what you see here is a list of apps from various app stores of e-commerce platforms. Now, there are filters on the left, just like we saw before for searching. And on the right, we have a list of apps. We can click on any of these apps to get details. I'm going to search for a specific app as a demo, which is Oberlo. And just to show you an example. It looks a lot like what you got for the domains, just slightly different information. For Oberlo, the app, we see information like the number of installs. We also see the penetration rate. It blows my mind actually that Oberlo is installed on over 10% of all Shopify active stores. We see the number of reviews for Oberlo. This comes from the Shopify App Store, and the average ratings. We see the categories that it's in and whatnot, a few other pieces of information. If we scroll down, we get to some interesting historical data. And this is a summary of the install count weekly going back to when I started tracking. So we can see quickly at a glance how quickly Oberlo is growing or potentially shrinking over time. Now, getting into some really interesting data, we see breakdowns below this of various different dimensions. And the first breakdown is co-installed apps. These are apps that are running on the same stores as Oberlo. And it's really interesting. I'm only showing the top 9 right now. I actually just wrote and deployed this feature this morning, and I shouldn't have done that. That's demoing number 101. You don't make code changes before a demo, but I took a bit of a risk. I'm only showing the top 9 right now, but by the end of the week, I'll have a show more button where you can see this information. You can also access the same information through search. But in any case, here are the top 9 apps that are co-installed with Oberlo. And it's really interesting. The top one is Looks Photo Reviews. If we wanted to, we could click on this, and this would actually take us to a store search showing us all the stores that are running both Oberlo and Looks. But we won't do that just yet. Let's talk about what information is here. We see that Looks is installed on 24,437 stores that are also using Oberlo. And that's a penetration rate of 18.6%. 18.6% of Oberlo merchants are also using photo reviews, an enormous percentage. Now, some interesting information here, Lift. By the way, you can also hover on this to get a description of all these columns as well, because it's easy to lose track. Lift tells you how much more likely or less likely this app is to be installed on stores running Oberlo compared to stores that are not running Oberlo. So what we're seeing is that Looks Photo Reviews is 3.6 times more likely to be used on Oberlo stores. And let's contrast this with, I believe this is Shopify's product reviews app. We could click through to get those details. But Shopify's product reviews actually have a negative correlation. They are less likely to be used on stores using Oberlo compared to stores not using Oberlo. So there's a few other breakdowns that you can look at that give you the same metrics: installs, penetration rate, lift. They are categories, countries, and products sold. But that's it for a tour of apps. And that's actually it for a quick overview of Storeleads. So now let's use Storeleads to look at the common prospecting strategies that I described before. Many people start by identifying high-value merchants, which basically translates to merchant size. Larger merchants are more likely to have a need and budget for complex technology solutions. So let's look at finding high-value merchants by pricing plan first. And in the case of Shopify, that means you want to start with a list of Shopify Plus merchants. These are the merchants that are using Shopify's most expensive plan. So we do that by switching back to a domain search and filtering on platform Shopify, status active. This just gives you all the active Shopify stores. There's a whole bunch of filters here on the left. We're going to skip over several of them in the interest of time. And we'll get to plan here. We click on Shopify Plus, and our list of stores on the right will be narrowed to just stores using Shopify Plus. You can see that there's slightly more than 12,500 of them. At any point in time, you can click on these stores and see, okay, here's the plan. You can actually see the exact date that they switched to Shopify Plus. So, like I said, 12,500 domains running Shopify Plus. That's a great start. And for some use cases, that might be all the targeting that you need. But let's say I want to dig a little bit deeper and find merchants that started using Shopify Plus in the last few months. If you're a Shopify Plus technology partner, these new Shopify Plus merchants are a great lead list. So how do I do that? Well, I click on over to Advanced Search in the upper left. And what happens is, Advanced Search is a mode that lets you express more complex searches. I couldn't do this through the standard basic search. But when you click over to Advanced Search, your current search filters are preserved. So what I'm seeing here is still a list of Shopify Plus stores, active Shopify Plus stores. Now what I want to do is scroll to the bottom and add a filter on last plan change at, and say, I want to see Shopify Plus merchants that have changed plans since March 1st, 2020. Then click Execute Search, and we'll see that the numbers go down. There are 2,829 merchants that have switched to Shopify Plus since March 1st. Now, like I said, I can click on any of them to see the exact date they switched. And let's say I want to go a little bit further and narrow my search to stores that switched to Shopify from Magento in that same time frame. And I can do that by adding a search filter on last platform. All right, here, last platform. And then click off Magento and click Execute Search. And I can see there's 103 stores that match that criteria. Shopify Plus stores that started using Shopify Plus since March 1st and have switched to from Magento in that time frame. Now, this filter might be too narrow for most use cases, but it's just an example of what's possible with the right data. And having this information can be really helpful. It's not just for prospecting, but it can be helpful for communication. The more context you have on a lead, the more effective and specific you can be in their communication with them. You're likely to message a merchant differently if you know that they just switched to Shopify after being on Magento for the last 10 years, compared to a merchant that just started a brand new store just a few months ago. Having this context can really, really help. Now, a few more quick examples of identifying high-value merchants. You can use Advanced Search to find stores based on employee counts. And to do that, I will click Clear to start a new search and add a filter on employee counts. You can see there's a ton of options here: currency code, combined followers, that's a sum of all the followers across social media, average product price and whatnot. You can search for location, city, country, etc. But I'm going to search for employees. Now in this case, I'll search for employees that have at least stores that have at least 250 employees. And I'll leave the maximum range open-ended, that's 250 plus, but you can also type in a maximum to see only the stores with employees within that range. Click Execute Search, and I get back 1,894 stores in the database that have at least 250 employees. Now, you can also filter stores based on revenue estimates to identify high-value merchants, but let's skip over that in the interest of time. In all these cases, these searches are just starting points, and you want to layer in your own filters that are relevant to your business. Now, these could be localization features where you only look at stores in a specific continent, country, state, or city, or you can localize your searches to stores using a specific language on the website. Depending on the technology or service you provide, you'll also want to apply appropriate filters. For instance, if you're a technology vendor that's focused on Instagram or a marketing agency that specializes in Instagram, you probably only want to find stores with an Instagram presence. Though you could argue in the case of marketing agency, you might also want to find stores that have little or no Instagram presence, because then you have a chance to sell your expertise on scaling their audience. All of these approaches are possible with the filters that are available here in Storeleads. So that is the first type of prospecting approach that I see all the time, finding high value merchants. Now let's look at an example of finding high growth merchants. That's our second strategy for prospecting. In this example, we'll show stores based on the number, we'll find stores based on the number and growth rate of social media followers. And we'll specifically look at Instagram. So we'll click clear to start a new search. We'll add a filter on Instagram followers. We can look at for Facebook followers, Pinterest followers, etc. And I'm going to leave an open-ended search for stores that have at least 5,000 Instagram followers. And the reason I'm doing this is I don't want to find micro merchants. Now, 5,000 is an arbitrary threshold. You might choose to do 1,000, 100, 10,000, whatever the case may be. But I just, in this one example, wanted to leave out the micro merchants just for the sake of not showing them. Now, there are 255,000 stores with at least 5,000 Instagram followers. That's interesting. But let's look for the high growth stores in that subset. So what we do is we add another filter on Instagram followers added in the last 30 days as a percent. You can also search based on absolute values, but then the scales are very difficult to accommodate. So let's look for Instagram followers that are gaining at least 5%, stores that are gaining at least 5% of their Instagram followers in the last 30 days. If you want to find shrinking stores, you can also provide a negative value here as well. So we click execute search and we get back 26,875 stores that meet our criteria, at least 5,000 followers that are gaining 5% month over month. Now, finding stores by growth rate is a new feature on Storeleads. It was only added about a month ago, but the results are so useful that I'll be investing heavily in similar features. And by the end of this year, you'll be able to find stores based on employee growth rate, product sold growth rate, and estimated revenue growth rate. Now, let's look at how to identify prospects based on technology usage. And there are two scenarios within this. First is competitive technology usage, where you find prospects that are running a competitor software and you try to win their business. And then there's complementary technology usage, where you find prospects running a partner software. Or maybe you don't have partners yet and you're looking to discover technologies that are often installed on the same stores as your solution. In fact, we've already seen how to do that. All of these scenarios are handled in the same way on Storeleads. So what we'll do is we'll switch back to a basic search and we'll find stores. Just wait for it to finish loading. We'll find stores that have installed Oberlo. And we can click through to the Oberlo app page through the store details if we want. But what I want to show here is the ability to search for stores based on the install date. And right below it, if you want, you can actually search for stores based on the uninstall date, which has some use cases too. So now let's find our stores that have started using Oberlo since June the 1st. We click on our date and we get our results back. There are slightly more than 50,000 of them. Now, you often want to find stores that have recently installed an app, since there's often a sales opportunity on technology transitions. The store that installs a new app might not yet be committed to it, and they might just be kicking the tires to see if it works for their business, and they're often open to considering a competitive offering at the same time. And you do the same search to identify stores that are running complementary technologies. If you don't have partners yet, we've already seen how to find them. Once you have a partner, it opens up a whole range of other possibilities like co-marketing. So there's a lot more that you can do with Storeleads, but that's all the time I have. Thanks for listening. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out. I'm on email all the time. And now I'll hand it off to Derek to show you how he integrates Storeleads with other tools.
Yeah, amazing. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And I think we had a really good discussion here in chat about some of the functionality of this tool that I don't think people have ever seen or thought of before. So and what was the only thing missing from that, or what I'd like to say, and I said it here in chat, is that tool is amazing, and people are praising you in chat. OmniConvert just bought your tool literally today, and then Blair is saying that like he loves the tool and how responsive you are to installing new features. So yeah, thank you for just making something amazing that we can all get behind. And what I would say with that data that we saw there is that the data is extremely powerful, but without the doing anything after that, you've just gone and looked at some numbers, and so now we have to go execute on it. So what are the next steps? What do the next steps look like? Well, to me, the first thing that we do from there is we're going to maybe enrich this information another way. By the way, and I know you don't have in your system, and I don't think you even should have, personally identifiable information, really, correct? Yeah. So so we can take the domains or the website addresses of of our target list, and I do recommend making that list relatively small. Maybe it's only 15, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 100 domains to start with, and then enriching it. I use a tool called Uplead for this. You can actually use ZoomInfo, which is now Datanyze and Discover.org or Discover.org. It's not even .org. I don't even know. You could use Clearbit to enrich it, and I even have a virtual assistant who manually does this process. And what it looks like is essentially, so if you want to do it manually for a few accounts, you could do this. You've got, you mentioned like some people just switched to Shopify Plus, or they're trialing a competitor software. You've got a handful of merchants that are just a perfect target for you. So you can choose whether you want their email address or their LinkedIn or both, right? And you could even track them down on Facebook and reach out that way, because a lot of people in the e-commerce ecosystem are using Facebook and Facebook Messenger fairly religiously. For me, it's either LinkedIn or email. So for LinkedIn, I might just look up the company name in LinkedIn, and you can click on that company account. And when you click on that company account, you click on people, and then you, of course, anybody listed there could be a great person to connect with. Might create a custom outreach message that's something along the lines of, hey, I just thought I saw you. You could even say really specific. I saw you were trialing this tool. Thought you might want to know about this other tool. Let me know if you want to chat about it. Something along those lines gets the conversation started. You can use the same copy over into email. If they accept the connection request, you can scrape their email address through LinkedIn. I don't recommend doing that. I think it's a little bad manner at this point, and it's not a good way to start the conversation. Ironically, though, like I don't like doing it through LinkedIn or saying that like, oh, you're, as a LinkedIn connection. But what I'm actually okay with is guessing their email address with just name@company.com and seeing if that gets a response, and you can plug that into a third-party tool that validates whether that email address can receive anything before sending out the message. Or you can use a tool like Uplead or Clearbit, Enrich, or Reveal to get this data directly. And Vincent says, when is the Salesforce integration coming, Tyler?
They're actually pretty quick to add. I have one more project that I need to finish first, so I'm thinking it'll be end of August, early September timeframe.
Yeah, awesome. Love it. And until then, you can still import all the data from CSV. It's just maybe not updated automatically daily, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
And so you can still get quite a lot done there. And so this is kind of my process on the outreach. And so, one final step on that, I know that a lot of people here are technology or agency, and you want to go for a quick sell of the software. I look for more, I call it marketing oriented activities, it's kind of up the funnel, if you will, things that we can provide value to them for. It's one of the reasons we do virtual events, is because it's a great offer in a cold email outreach. And so for our fashion and apparel event, we got a list of about 500 brands. We outreached them. We got something like 40 or 50 signups to that virtual event from cold outreach. And so what we're doing there, we already have their email address, but we're taking them from cold outbound outreach, which always exists on a sales prospecting tool like Outreach.io, or I use Mixmax. You can use Mailshake. There's a dozen of those platforms, and they're on your outbound system. Then they sign up for your email list. They're now on your inbound system, and specifically to us, they join a few partner email lists which when it says that right in the sign up process. So it's a great way to do outbound prospecting to events to get them to convert on the event. And then of course from the event, you have this post follow-up sequence that nurtures them in through the product. Now that's really great if you can create niche events or webinars or something along that line. If you need to expand it out to product and look to do direct response sales from there, you can. One of the things that we'd hinted on briefly at Gorgeous when they ran part of this system, certain tools have different kinds of purchasing time frames. And it's what I mean is like a help desk is something you look for like once every 3 years or less. And a help desk is something that you either really need or you don't care at all. And so like if you reach out to a merchant at random for a help desk solution, odds are they're not going to care about you. And so what we found with certain outbound campaigns was that months later, they would actually come back to us and be like, oh yeah, you like messaged us about help us, but I didn't care back then. And so they remembered you from a long time ago, but they would convert through another channel much later. But when you add this timing component, like if they're trialing Zendesk or Reamaze or another technology component, it 10x'd the response rate. Now, our upper bound number of emails sent went from like, let's say 3,000 a month to 300 a month, maybe 400 a month, something like that. But our response rate went through the roof. And I think that's really about timing and value add and how you should think about using these filtering and search capabilities within Storeleads to find the right merchants at the right time. Don't think about it as like, oh my God, I've got 1 million merchants. I've got 1 million emails to send. That's way too much. Just let them raise their hand in one way or another to trigger the moment, or create a separate piece of collateral for them to stumble across, fall into, if you will. And then one final thought on this is combining the reason to do LinkedIn outreach combined with the email, multiple touch points is stronger. We've seen a higher conversion rate from it. You can also add a third component, which is Facebook and Google retargeting ads. And so you've got retargeting ads, cold email outreach, LinkedIn outreach. And then even if they don't take you up on any of that, if they do connect with you on LinkedIn, make sure that you're posting regularly in your feed and it will drive responses and clicks and stuff like that. So you're actually growing your personal LinkedIn following, and you start to leverage that as a marketing tool for the business. All right, what did I miss, Tyler? Is that
you did great. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, obviously everybody is really excited about this in the chat, and I think that you've created something really cool. And we're going to talk later about collaborating on some additional components to this that I think are really cool, from showcasing the e-commerce technology landscape. Showing that 20% of stores have Oberlo installed is like really a fascinating thing. And I think I'm kind of a Venn diagram guy. Yeah. I want the ultimate Venn diagram, like the whole landscape. I want to see all the overlapping circles in all the weirdest ways. You know what I mean? We'd have to create like a computer algorithm to do this mapping. But anyways, yeah, it's really cool to think about how that can be used for prospecting. I think it can be used for competitive analysis, both for technology and for merchants. And it can be used for prospecting from a venture funding standpoint. It can just be used to understanding certain ecosystems, even finding opportunities for new app categories or products. So it's like the use cases for this are endless, or have a high upper bound, I should say. All right, awesome, Tyler. And let me share it again, the link to Storeleads here in chat. If you're looking to use the tool, you can reach out to Tyler directly, click this link and book a time with him. I think there's some sort of special offer for the people here. It's $25 off the first month, and it's totally worth it. And you highly recommend upgrading to the API integration. I think you have to pay a little bit more, but then you get the data fed to you on a daily basis. Oh, that's the thing I missed, is enriching. So on the inbound perspective, all right, really quick on this, enriching when somebody comes in and signs up for your tool, they install their app, they give you their My Shopify app email address or their domain name. As soon as you have that domain name, you want to immediately tie that to all of this data that Tyler's been able to create with Storeleads. And the reason is because you want to be able to segment and nurture different people in different ways based on things you're seeing. Are they have a high growth Instagram following? You might want to treat them a little bit different than somebody who's building their business through content marketing. I don't know. And you can find those things out automatically. And you can just think about how you might be able to segment and increase conversion rates through a few major key segments in that way. And so, yeah, I think that's actually huge, especially for these apps that are getting, hundreds of installs a month. You can start to branch out those sequences, like especially the trial to paid conversion sequence, and it can be a lot more impactful when you tie in some of this data. All right, that's the story on inbound. All right, now I think I covered everything. Tyler, thanks so much. We're gonna keep on going, and I look forward to talking to you soon. And I really hope that your ankle heals up and you get some rest.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for putting this event together. It was great.
Awesome. Talk to you later.